Velthari stood in the sterile white chamber of the High Command building. The walls hummed with soft blue light that helped him think clearly. His 4 eyes moved across the datapad in his hands. Another assignment. Another species to study and record. The Catherian observer had done this work for 300 years. He had watched the Zephyrians fight with their energy weapons. He had recorded how the Molten Ones used heat as their main tool of war. He had seen the crystal beings shatter their enemies with sound waves. All of it was neat and organized. All of it followed the rules that civilized species used when they fought. "The humans," said Commander Thexval, his voice echoing in the chamber. "They just joined our confederation last month. We need to know how they fight." Velthari nodded. It was standard work. When a new species joined the Galactic Confederation, someone had to study their military. The information helped everyone understand what the new members could do in battle. It helped make plans for future wars. "They seem very basic," Velthari said, looking at the first reports about humans. "Small bodies, weak muscles. They only live for about 80 of their years. Their technology is simple compared to ours." Commander Thexval made a sound that meant agreement. "Yes, but they did create faster-than-light travel on their own. That means they are not completely stupid. Still, this should be easy work for you." Velthari felt good about getting an easy assignment. His last job had been studying the war cats of Proxima 7. Those creatures fought in ways that made no sense. They would attack their own allies during battle. They would eat their enemies while still fighting. It had taken him 50 years to understand their methods. Humans looked much simpler. The early reports showed they had emotions that controlled their thinking. They got angry quickly. They became sad when their friends died. They seemed to care too much about things that did not matter in war. "Where will I observe them?" Velthari asked. "New Busan," the commander said. "It is one of their colony worlds on the edge of known space. The Drekmori have been attacking settlements there for 10 years. The humans are building up their military to deal with the problem." Velthari knew about the Drekmori. They were raiders who attacked weak colonies and took what they wanted. Most species just paid them to go away. It was cheaper than fighting. The Drekmori were not very strong, but they were annoying enough that most people just gave them what they wanted. The humans refused to pay the Drekmori. Commander Thexval continued. "They want to fight instead. It should give you good material to study." 3 days later, Velthari stood on the surface of New Busan. The planet was mostly green with some blue water. It looked peaceful. Small buildings were spread across the land. Roads connected them. Everything looked very organized and clean. The human military base was built next to the main town. Velthari set up his recording equipment in a building that let him see everything. The humans had given him permission to watch and record. They seemed happy to have someone from the Confederation observe their work. The first human he met was Commander Kang Hoon. The man was tall for a human, but still shorter than Velthari. His hair was black and cut very short. His eyes were dark and serious. "Welcome to New Busan," Kang Hoon said in the common language that all Confederation species used. "We hope you will learn useful things about our methods." Velthari studied the human commander. Kang Hoon stood straight and looked directly at him when speaking. This was different from many species who looked down or to the side when talking to Catherians. Humans seemed to have less fear than others. "I am here to record how your species handles military situations," Velthari said. "Please act as you normally would. Pretend I'm not here." Over the next few days, Velthari watched the humans prepare for possible Drekmori attacks. He met more of their military people. Parkmina worked in tactical operations. She was smaller than the male humans, but seemed just as strong in her thinking. She spent hours looking at maps and planning different ways to defend the colony. Li Jun led a group of soldiers who went out to watch for enemies. His team was always moving around the area near the colony. They learned every hill, every tree, every place where enemies might hide. They worked harder than most species Velthari had seen. What surprised the Catherian observer most was how the humans talked to each other. They joked and laughed even while preparing for war. They seemed to care about each other in ways that went beyond just being teammates. When one soldier got hurt during training, the others gathered around him like he was family. "Is this normal behavior for your species during military preparation?" Velthari asked Parkmina one day. She looked confused by the question. "What do you mean?" "The emotional connections between your soldiers. Most species keep feeling separate from military work. Emotions can make bad decisions in battle. Parkmina was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "We fight better when we care about each other. When you know your teammate would die for you, you fight harder to make sure he does not have to." This made no sense to Velthari. In his experience, emotions made soldiers weak. They would hesitate to make hard choices. They would make mistakes because they were thinking about feelings instead of tactics. But the humans seemed to think their emotions made them stronger. Velthari wrote this in his first report. Human military doctrine appears to include emotional elements that may create tactical weaknesses. Further observation needed to determine impact on combat effectiveness. As he watched them train and prepare, Velthari noticed other strange things about humans. They never seemed to rest completely. Even when they were supposed to be sleeping, some of them stayed awake to watch for danger. They took turns so that someone was always alert. They also spent time thinking about things that had not happened yet. They made plans for problems they might face. They prepared for situations that might never come. Most species just dealt with problems when they appeared. Humans seem to worry about everything that could go wrong. Your species uses much energy on preparation, Velthari told Commander Kang-hoon. Better to be ready for something that does not happen than to be surprised by something that does, the human replied. Velthari wrote down this answer. It showed how humans thought about time differently than other species. They spent resources on possible futures instead of just dealing with the present moment. After 2 weeks of watching, Velthari felt ready to see humans in actual combat. The Drakmori had been quiet lately, but intelligence reports said they were gathering for a new attack. Soon he would see how all this human preparation worked in real battle. He expected it to be similar to other species he had studied. There would be some fighting, some casualties, and then either victory or defeat. The humans would follow the same basic patterns that most civilized species used in war. Velthari had no idea how wrong he was about to be. The attack came at dawn. Velthari was checking his recording equipment when the alarms started screaming across the human base. Red lights flashed everywhere. Soldiers ran to their positions with weapons in their hands. Drakmori ships incoming, Parkmina announced over the communication system. 12 vessels, standard rating formation. Velthari watched through his monitoring devices as the alien ships appeared in the sky. The Drakmori used old but reliable technology. Their ships were gray and shaped like spears. They moved fast and hit hard, then left quickly with whatever they could steal. The human response was immediate. Defense weapons fired into the sky. Fighter ships launched from the base. Everything happened exactly as Velthari expected from the training he had observed. But then something changed. Instead of attacking the military base or the main town where valuable goods were stored, the Drakmori ships flew toward a smaller building on the edge of the settlement. Velthari checked his maps. It was the medical center where human doctors treated sick and injured people. "Why are they attacking the hospital?" Velthari asked a human soldier who was running past. "They want to hurt civilians," the soldier said without stopping. "Make us scared so we will pay them to leave us alone." This was a common Drakmori tactic. Attack something that was not defended, but was important to the people. Make them choose between fighting and protecting innocent lives. Most species chose to pay rather than risk their medical people and patients. The Drakmori ships landed near the medical center. Armed raiders jumped out and ran toward the building. They fired their weapons at the walls and windows. Smoke began to rise from the structure. Velthari expected the humans to contact the Drakmori leaders and start talking about payment. This was how civilized species handled such situations. You negotiated. You found a price that made the raiders go away. Everyone understood these rules. The humans did not follow the rules. Commander Kang-hoon's voice came over the communication system. It was different from before. Colder. Harder. "All units, the medical center is under attack. Doctors and patients are inside. We are going to stop this now." Velthari watched human soldiers move toward the medical center. They did not march in neat formations like most species. They spread out and used the land to hide their movement. They moved like hunters instead of soldiers. The first human to reach the medical center was Li Jun with his reconnaissance team. Velthari watched through his long-distance viewing equipment as the human soldiers surrounded the building. They did not announce themselves. They did not demand surrender. They just started killing Drakmori raiders. It was fast and brutal. The humans used their weapons with accuracy that surprised Velthari. They worked together like they had done this many times before. In 10 minutes, all the Drakmori outside the building were dead. But inside the medical center, something had happened that changed everything. When the human soldiers entered the building, they found that the Drakmori had killed some of the people inside. 3 doctors were dead. 2 patients had died when the raiders destroyed life support equipment. Among the dead was a young doctor named Kim Soo. Belthari watched the human soldiers come out of the medical center. Their faces were different now. The emotions he had seen before, the jokes and laughter, were gone. Something cold and angry had replaced them. Cho Min was one of the medical workers who had survived the attack. She had been treating wounded people when the raiders came. Now she stood outside the damaged building with tears on her face. But instead of running away or crying, she picked up a rifle from one of the dead Drakmori. "I want to come with you," she told Lee Jun. "You are a medic," Lee Jun said. "Your job is to save lives, not take them." "My job was to save Sue," Cho Min replied. "I failed. Now I want to make sure this never happens again." Lee Jun looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Can you shoot?" "I can learn." This confused Belthari greatly. In his experience, medical people stayed away from fighting. They were protected by laws that all civilized species followed. Doctors did not become soldiers. It was not how things worked. But the humans seemed to have different ideas about how things worked. Yang Jie was an engineer who had been repairing equipment when the attack started. Now he was building something that Belthari had never seen before. It looked like a small explosive device, but it was made from parts that came from the medical center. "What is that?" Belthari asked. "Something to make the raiders think twice about coming back," Yang Jie said. His voice was calm, but his hands moved with the careful precision of someone who was very angry, but keeping that anger under control. The most shocking thing came when the surviving Drakmori raiders tried to leave the planet. Their ships were damaged but could still fly. In most situations, the defending species would let them go. The attack had failed. The raiders had learned their lesson. Everyone would go back to their normal lives. The humans did not let them go. Commander Kang Hoon ordered all human ships to follow the Drakmori vessels. "Track them," he said. "I want to know where they go. I want to know where they live. I want to know everything about them." Nam Gil was a man who had worked in the mines before joining the military. He volunteered to lead the tracking mission. "How far do we follow them?" he asked. "As far as it takes," Kang Hoon replied. For 3 days, Belthari watched human ships follow the damaged Drakmori vessels across space. The raiders tried to lose their pursuers by flying through asteroid fields and near dangerous stars. The humans followed them everywhere. Finally, the Drakmori ships reached a hidden base on a small asteroid. It was where this group of raiders lived and kept their stolen goods. Usually, such a base would be safe. Most species did not have the time or resources to chase raiders to their homes. The humans attacked the base. Immediately, Belthari watched in growing shock as human soldiers fought their way through the asteroid base. They did not try to capture prisoners. They did not demand surrender. They killed every Drakmori they found. When it was over, Nam Gil sent a message back to the human base. "The job is done. All raiders eliminated. The base is destroyed." Belthari looked at his recordings of the entire event. From the first attack on the medical center to the destruction of the Drakmori base, only 5 days had passed. In that time, the humans had gone from defending their colony to completely destroying their enemies. This was not how civilized warfare worked. There were supposed to be negotiations. There were supposed to be prisoners taken and later exchanged. There were supposed to be limits on how far you pursued your enemies. The humans seemed to have no limits. That night, Belthari sat in his quarters trying to write his report. He had watched many species fight, but he had never seen anything like what the humans had done. They had not just defeated their enemies. They had hunted them down and eliminated them completely. What worried him most was how calm the humans seemed after it was over. They were not celebrating victory or mourning their actions. They were just going back to their normal work as if nothing unusual had happened. When Belthari asked Commander Kang Hoon about the complete destruction of the Drakmori group, the human commander looked surprised by the question. "They killed our people," Kang Hoon said. "They attacked doctors and patients who could not defend themselves." "What did you expect us to do?" "Most species would have negotiated," Belthari said, "or demanded payment for damages, or taken prisoners to exchange later. Kang Hoon was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Those people they killed will never negotiate again. They will never demand payment. They will never be exchanged. The raiders made a choice. We made ours." Belthari wrote in his report that night, "Human response to attack exceeded all expected parameters. Their pursuit of enemies appears to have no geographic or temporal limits. Recommend continued observation to determine if this behavior is typical or exceptional." He had no idea that what he had just witnessed was humans being gentle. 3 weeks after the destruction of the Drakmori base, space around New Busan filled with enemy ships. Belthari counted them through his long-range sensors. 47 vessels. This was not a raiding party. This was a war fleet. The Drakmori had never assembled so many ships in one place before. Word of what happened to their raiding group had spread through their territory. Other Drakmori clans were angry. They could not allow a weak species like humans to completely destroy one of their groups without punishment. Belthari expected the humans to call for help from the Galactic Confederation. New Busan was just one small colony. 47 enemy ships was more than any single colony could handle. The smart thing to do was ask for support from other member species. The humans did call for help, but not the kind Belthari expected. "This is Admiral Ko Yoon," came a voice over the communication channels. "Human fleet arriving in 6 hours. Hold your positions until we get there." Belthari checked the incoming ships on his sensors. 12 human vessels were approaching New Busan. They were outnumbered almost 4-1. This was not reinforcement. This was barely enough to make the fight last a little longer. When Admiral Ko Yoon arrived at the human base, Belthari met her in person. She was shorter than Commander Kang Hoon, but carried herself with the same straight-backed confidence. Her hair was gray, which meant she was older than the other humans he had met. "Admiral," Belthari said, "your fleet is greatly outnumbered. Would it not be wise to request assistance from the Confederation?" Ko Yoon looked at him with dark eyes that seemed much older than her face. "The Confederation did not kill our doctors," she said. "The Drakmori did. This is our problem to solve. But the odds of victory are very small," Belthari pointed out. "The odds of the Drakmori learning to leave us alone are very high," Ko Yoon replied. The battle began the next morning. Belthari watched from his observation post as the human ships rose to meet the Drakmori fleet. The enemy vessels were larger and had more powerful weapons. In any normal engagement, the humans would be destroyed quickly. The humans did not fight normally. Instead of meeting the enemy in open space where the Drakmori advantages would matter most, the human ships stayed close to the planet. They used the gravity well and atmospheric interference to limit how many enemy ships could attack them at once, but it was the individual actions of human pilots that shocked Belthari. Most Baijin was flying a small fighter ship when 3 Drakmori vessels surrounded him. His engines were damaged and his weapons were almost out of power. Most pilots would try to escape or surrender. Baijin aimed his ship at the largest enemy vessel and flew directly into it. The explosion destroyed both ships. Why did he do that? Belthari asked Park Mina, who was coordinating the battle from the ground. "Because those 3 ships were about to attack our medical transport," she said without looking away from her screens. 40 wounded people on that transport. Jin saved them all. This was not the only time a human pilot chose to crash into enemy ships rather than retreat. Ryuhan did the same thing when his weapons failed. So did 3 other pilots whose names Belthari did not learn before they died. Each time the human pilot aimed for the most important enemy vessel in the group they were fighting. Each time, they transmitted their final words to their fellow humans before impact. The words were always about protecting something or someone. The Drakmori had never faced enemies who used their own ships as weapons. Their tactics assumed that pilots would try to survive. When human pilots stopped caring about survival and started caring only about damage to the enemy, the Drakmori formation began to fall apart. But the most disturbing moment came when Captain Lim Seo found herself commanding a damaged destroyer. Her ship had lost most of its weapons and its engines were failing. A Drakmori command vessel was moving toward the planet to attack the human base directly. "Captain," her communications officer said, "we cannot stop that ship with our remaining weapons." "Then we stop it with our ship," Lim Seo replied. Belthari watched as the human destroyer changed course toward the enemy command vessel. The Drakmori ship tried to move away, but it was too large and slow. Lim Seo's ship struck it in the center. Her final transmission was simple: for Sue and the others. The explosion lit up space like a small sun. Both ships were completely destroyed. But the Drakmori lost their command and control center, while the humans lost only one damaged vessel that was already failing. After 6 hours of fighting, the Drakmori fleet began to retreat. They had started with 47 ships. 31 were left. The humans had started with 12 ships. 4 were left. By the numbers, the Drakmori had won. They had destroyed more enemy vessels and killed more enemy people. But they were running away while the humans were preparing to follow them. "Should we pursue?" asked Li Jun, who had been promoted to colonel after the ground fighting. "Of course, Khan," said Admiral Ko Yoon. "We need to make sure they understand the lesson." What followed was a chase across 3 star systems. The human ships were faster than the large Drakmori vessels. Every time the enemy fleet stopped to rest or refuel, the humans attacked. Not to destroy them all at once, but to keep them moving and stressed. Lieutenant Colonel Osung led landing parties that attacked Drakmori supply bases. His soldiers moved like ghosts across alien worlds. They destroyed fuel depots and supply warehouses. They sabotaged repair facilities and communication centers. "We are not trying to kill them all in battle," Osung explained to Velthari during one of these raids. "We are making it so they cannot function as a military force." The psychological impact was obvious. Drakmori warriors were used to attacking weak colonies and taking what they wanted. They were not used to being hunted across space by enemies who never stopped coming. Velthari watched Drakmori communications when possible. Their messages showed growing fear and confusion. They had never faced an enemy like this. Usually, if raiders lost a battle, they just went somewhere else. The humans followed them everywhere. Why do they not give up? One Drakmori captain transmitted to another. "How can we make them stop?" came the reply. The answer came when the human fleet finally cornered the remaining Drakmori ships near a dead planet. Instead of demanding surrender, Admiral Koyun sent a simple message to the enemy fleet. "You killed our doctors. You attacked our wounded. You tried to make us afraid. Now you know what fear feels like. Leave our space and never come back. If we see you again, we will finish this." Most of the Drakmori ships jumped to faster than light speed immediately. A few tried to fight. Those few were destroyed quickly by the human vessels. When it was over, Velthari tried to understand what he had witnessed. The humans had been outnumbered and outgunned. They had lost more ships and more people than their enemies. But somehow they had won completely. The victory was not just military, it was psychological. The Drakmori had not just lost a battle. They had lost their confidence. They had learned that attacking humans brought consequences that never ended. "How do you define victory?" Velthari asked Admiral Koyun after the last enemy ship had fled. "When our people can live without fear," she said. "When our doctors can heal the sick without worrying about raiders. When our children can sleep safely." "But the cost was very high," Velthari pointed out. "Many of your people died." Koyun was quiet for a long moment. "Yes, but many more will live because of what we did here. Sometimes the price of peace is war. Sometimes the price of life is death." That night, Velthari wrote another report. He tried to explain what he had seen, but the words seemed inadequate. "How do you describe a species that treats death as a tool instead of an outcome to avoid? How do you explain warriors who fight not for glory or conquest, but for the simple right to be left alone?" His report concluded, "Human military doctrine appears to be based on principles not found in other species. They do not seek to minimize casualties or limit conflict. Instead, they seek to maximize the cost of attacking them. Recommendation: advise all Confederation members to avoid conflicts with human colonies." Velthari thought he had seen the full extent of human warfare capabilities. He was wrong again. 2 months after the Drakmori fleet retreat, the real war began. Velthari first learned about it when emergency signals started flooding the communication networks. Not just from New Busan, but from dozens of human colonies across the galaxy. The Drakmori Warlord Council had made a decision that would doom their entire species. They could not allow the defeat at New Busan to stand without response. If word spread that humans could be attacked without immediate retaliation, other weak species might think they could resist Drakmori raids too, so they gathered every ship, every warrior, every weapon their civilization possessed. Over 300 vessels assembled in the deep space between star systems. It was the largest military force the Drakmori had ever created. Their plan was simple and brutal. They would attack every human colony at the same time. They would destroy everything. They would kill everyone. When they were finished, humans would be nothing but a memory and a warning to other species. Velthari expected the humans to panic when they learned about the massive fleet heading toward their worlds. He expected desperate calls for help to the Galactic Confederation. He expected evacuation plans and surrender negotiations. Instead, the humans did something that made no sense to any civilized mind. Commander Xin Yu stood in the communication center at New Busan and began broadcasting on all open channels. Not just to human colonies, but to every species in the galaxy that might be listening. "Attention all Drakmori forces," Xin Yu said in a calm, clear voice. "You want to find human settlements? Here are the coordinates." What followed was a complete list of every human colony, military base, research station, and civilian outpost in known space, exact locations, population numbers, defense capabilities, everything an attacking force would need to plan the complete destruction of humanity. Velthari could not believe what he was hearing. "Why are you telling them where to find you?" he asked Xin Yu. "Because now we know exactly where they will be," the human commander replied, "and they have to split their forces to attack all our worlds at once." This made no tactical sense to Velthari. The humans were outnumbered and spread across dozens of star systems. By giving the enemy a target list, they were making it easier for the Drakmori to destroy them efficiently. But as the days passed, Velthari began to understand the true nature of human strategy. The Drakmori split their 300 ships into smaller fleets to attack multiple human worlds simultaneously. This was exactly what the humans wanted. Instead of facing one massive enemy force, they would face many smaller ones. More importantly, the humans had used the time since the New Busan battle to prepare for exactly this situation. Colonel Wanji had been leading long-range reconnaissance missions across Drakmori space for weeks. His teams had identified every Drakmori base, supply depot, and civilian center. They knew where the Drakmori kept their families. They knew where they stored their food and fuel. They knew everything about Drakmori society. When the Drakmori fleets reached human colonies, they found something unexpected. The humans were not just defending their worlds. They were attacking Drakmori worlds at the same time. Major Yun Ki had developed new weapons during the preparation period, not just instruments of destruction, but tools of terror, devices that created sounds that drove Drakmori minds to madness, chemicals that made their food taste like rotting meat, viruses that made their communications equipment broadcast human battle songs instead of military orders. "We are not trying to kill them all quickly," Yun Ki explained to Velthari. "We are trying to break their will to fight. Dead enemies can become martyrs. Broken enemies become warnings." The psychological warfare was unlike anything Velthari had ever seen. The humans studied their enemies not just to defeat them, but to understand what would hurt them most deeply. Captain Habin demonstrated this during the siege of a Drakmori stronghold on the edge of their territory. Instead of attacking the fortress directly, she positioned her forces just outside weapons range and waited. For 2 months, the human forces maintained their positions around the stronghold. They did not attack. They did not demand surrender. They just waited and watched, but they were not idle during this time. Habin's soldiers grew crops in full view of the enemy fortress. They cooked meals over open fires. They played games and sang songs. They lived normal, comfortable lives while the Drakmori inside the stronghold slowly ran out of food and water. "Why do you not attack?" the Drakmori commander finally transmitted to Habin. "Why should we?" she replied. "Time is on our side. We have food and water. We have supplies coming regularly. We can wait here for years if necessary." "How long can you wait?" The psychological pressure broke the Drakmori defenders before physical hunger did. They surrendered not because they could not fight, but because they could not bear the mental torture of watching their enemies live comfortably while they suffered. When Habin's forces finally entered the stronghold, they found Drakmori warriors who were physically capable of fighting, but mentally defeated. The humans had not just taken the fortress. They had destroyed the enemy's confidence in their own strength. This pattern repeated across dozens of battlefields. Humans used time as a weapon. They used comfort as torture. They turned the Drakmori's own thoughts against them. But the most disturbing human innovation was what Velthari came to think of as warfare by proxy. Sergeant Yijun led a special unit that studied Drakmori culture and history. His team learned that the Drakmori had ancient enemies, species they had raided and oppressed for generations. These species were weak individually, but they remembered every injustice. Yi Jun's unit contacted these species and offered them a simple deal. The humans would provide weapons and training. In exchange, these species would attack Drakmori worlds while the main Drakmori fleet was busy fighting humans. Within weeks, the Drakmori found themselves fighting wars on dozens of fronts against enemies they had forgotten existed. Old victims became new threats. Weak species that had always run from Drakmori raiders now hunted Drakmori civilians with human weapons and human training. "You are making the entire galaxy into a battlefield," Velthari said to Yi Jun. "We are making the entire galaxy a place where attacking humans has consequences," Yi Jun replied. "Every species that helps us now knows they are under human protection. Every species that opposes us now knows they will face human vengeance." The war lasted 6 months. When it ended, the Drakmori had lost more than their military fleet. They had lost their entire way of life. Their raiding culture could not survive in a galaxy where every attack brought overwhelming retaliation. Their warrior traditions meant nothing when their enemies used weapons designed specifically to break their minds. Their proud history became a source of shame when their ancient victims turned against them with human support. The final battle took place not in space, but on the Drakmori homeworld itself. Human forces led by General Shin Do landed on the planet and methodically dismantled the Drakmori government, military, and social structure. But they did not kill everyone. They did not destroy everything. Instead, they gave the surviving Drakmori a choice that no other species had ever offered defeated enemies. "You can die as warriors," General Shin Do told the Drakmori High Council, "or you can live as something better. We will teach you new ways to survive that do not require taking from others. We will help you build a society based on creation instead of destruction, but this is the only offer you will receive. Choose now." Most of the surviving Drakmori accepted the offer. They had seen what happened to those who continued to fight humans. They had learned that human warfare was not about winning battles. It was about changing reality itself. Velthari watched the surrender ceremony with growing horror. The humans had not just defeated their enemies. They had fundamentally altered the nature of an entire species. They had taken warriors and turned them into farmers. They had taken raiders and turned them into builders. "What have you done?" Velthari asked General Shindo. "What we always do," the human general replied. "We ended the war. But you have changed them completely. They are not the same species they were before." "No," Shindo agreed. "They are better. The Drakmori who wanted only to take from others are gone. The Drakmori who want to build something useful can stay." That night, Velthari sat in his quarters trying to process what he had witnessed. The humans had not just won a war. They had rewritten the fundamental nature of warfare itself. They had shown that conflict was not about destroying enemies, but about changing them. His report that night was longer than all his previous reports combined. He tried to explain how humans approached war not as a test of strength, but as a tool for reshaping reality. He tried to describe how they used psychology as effectively as weapons. He tried to warn the Confederation about what they had welcomed into their alliance. But even as he wrote, Velthari knew that words could not capture the full truth of what he had seen. Humanity was not just another member species. They were something unprecedented in galactic history. They were a species that had weaponized change itself. The war ended not with a final battle, but with a choice that broke every rule Velthari thought he understood about conflict and victory. 3 weeks after the surrender of the Drakmori High Council, Velthari stood in the main square of what had once been the Drakmori capital city. The buildings were damaged but not destroyed. The streets were filled with people, but they were not all Drakmori. Human soldiers worked alongside former Drakmori warriors to repair damaged structures. Human engineers taught Drakmori technicians how to build water purification systems instead of weapons. Human doctors treated Drakmori civilians who had been injured during the fighting. It made no sense. "Why are you helping them?" Velthari asked Dr. Junge, who was treating a young Drakmori child for injuries caused by falling debris. "Because she is hurt and I am a doctor," Junge replied without looking up from her work. "The war is over. Now we heal." "But these are your enemies," Velthari insisted. "They tried to destroy your entire species. They killed your people." Junge finally looked at him. Her eyes were tired but not angry. Yes, they did terrible things. But this child did not attack our medical center. This child did not kill Dr. Sue. This child was just born into a society that taught her the wrong things about how to survive. The transformation was happening everywhere Velthari looked. Drakmori, who had spent their entire lives raiding and taking from others, were learning how to grow food and build homes. Human teachers worked patiently with former warriors, showing them skills they had never needed before. But it was the conversation with Sergeant Yijun that gave Velthari the insight that would change everything he thought he knew about humanity. Yijun was supervising the construction of a new school where human and Drakmori children would learn together. Former enemies were teaching their young ones to read and write instead of fight and steal. How can you trust them? Velthari asked. How do you know they will not return to their old ways when you leave? Yijun stopped working and looked at the Catherian observer. Because we are not leaving, he said. This is how it works with us. When we fight someone, it is not because we hate them. It is because they are threatening something we love. Once they stop being a threat, they can become part of what we love instead. I do not understand, Velthari admitted. Yijun sat down on a pile of construction materials and gestured for Velthari to join him. Let me ask you something. When your species fights a war, what is the goal? To defeat the enemy, Velthari said immediately. To stop them from doing whatever they were doing that caused the conflict. And after you defeat them? Velthari thought about this. Then you go home. The war is over. But what stops them from becoming a threat again later? This was a question Velthari had never considered. In his experience, defeated enemies either stayed defeated or became problems for future generations to handle. I suppose nothing stops them. That is why some wars happen again after many years. Yijun nodded. That is the difference between us and everyone else in the galaxy. We do not fight wars to defeat enemies. We fight wars to end wars permanently. But how can you end war permanently? By removing the reasons people fight, Yijun explained. The Drakmori raided other species because they did not know how to survive any other way. Their entire culture was built around taking things from others, so we gave them a new culture built around creating things for themselves. Velthari looked around at the construction work happening in the square, humans and Drakmori working together to build something that neither species could have created alone. You changed them completely. We offered them the chance to change themselves, Yijun corrected. Many accepted. Some did not. The ones who could not give up the old ways. They chose to keep fighting until the end. And the ones who accepted? They discovered that creating things feels better than taking things. That building something with others is more satisfying than destroying something alone. That having friends is better than having victims. Over the following days, Velthari interviewed many of the former Drakmori warriors who had chosen to accept the human offer. Their stories were similar. They had expected to be killed or enslaved after their defeat. Instead, the humans had offered them something none of them had experienced before. A chance to start completely over. Kethamor had been a ship captain who had led raids for 30 years. Now he was learning to pilot transport vessels that carried medical supplies between human and Drakmori worlds. I spent my life taking things from others, he told Velthari. Food, technology, people. I thought that was strength. But the humans showed me something stronger. They showed me how to make things instead of taking them. Do you not miss your old life? Velthari asked. Kethamor was quiet for a moment. I miss feeling powerful, he said honestly. But I do not miss being afraid all the time. When you live by taking from others, you always worry that someone stronger will take from you. When you live by creating things, you only worry about making them better. The most profound conversation came when Velthari spoke with General Shindo, who was overseeing the integration of former Drakmori warriors into human society. Your species has done something unprecedented, Velthari told the general. You have transformed your enemies into allies. How is this possible? General Shindo considered the question carefully. Because we understand something that most species do not. War is not about hatred. War is about love. I do not understand that statement. We do not fight because we hate our enemies, Shindo explained. We fight because we love our friends, our families, our way of life. We love them so much that we will do anything to protect them, including terrible things that we do not want to do. But you killed so many Drakmori during the fighting. Yes, Shindo said sadly, and every death hurt us. But we chose to hurt ourselves rather than let them hurt the people we love. That is what war means to humans. We accept pain to prevent greater pain. And now? Now the war is over because the Drakmori are no longer a threat to what we love. In fact, many of them have become part of what we love, so we protect them too. Velthari spent his final week on the former Drakmori homeworld watching this protection in action. When other species tried to take advantage of the Drakmori's weakened state, human ships arrived to defend them. When refugee Drakmori needed food and shelter, human colonies opened their doors. When former raiders needed work, human companies offered jobs. The transformation was not just political or military. It was psychological and cultural. The humans had not just defeated the Drakmori. They had saved them from themselves. On his last day, Velthari walked through the rebuilt city center with Colonel Li Jun, who had been promoted to oversee the integration efforts. "How long will you stay here?" Velthari asked. "As long as it takes," Li Jun replied. "Maybe forever. This is our responsibility now. You could have simply destroyed them and taken their worlds. Yes, but then we would have become the thing we fought against. We would have become raiders who take from others instead of creators who build with others. Is this how your species always handles defeated enemies?" Li Jun stopped walking and looked at Velthari with serious eyes. "This is how we handle anyone who stops being an enemy. The Drakmori who continued to fight until the end, we did what was necessary. But the Drakmori who chose to change, they became our people. That is how it works with humans. You are either with us or against us. There is no neutral ground. And what about species who choose to be against you?" Li Jun's expression became cold and distant. Then they learn what the Drakmori learned. That fighting humans means accepting the consequences of fighting humans. We do not start wars, but we finish them. Permanently. That night, Velthari completed his final report. It was the longest document he had ever written. He tried to capture not just what he had observed, but what it meant for the future of the galaxy. His conclusion would become required reading for every military leader in the Confederation. "I was commanded to record human warfare. I have done so. But I now understand that what I witnessed was not warfare as other species understand it. It was something far more dangerous and far more powerful. Humans do not fight to win battles. They fight to win peace. They do not seek to defeat enemies. They seek to eliminate the possibility of future enemies. They do not make war for conquest or glory or resources. They make war to end war itself. This makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because they are stronger or smarter or more advanced than others, but because they understand warfare as a tool for creating the world they want to live in, rather than simply responding to the world they find themselves in. They fight not with their minds or their weapons, but with their hearts. They turn love into a military strategy. They weaponize their capacity for caring about others. This makes them nearly impossible to defeat, because you cannot destroy an enemy's weapons when their weapons are their emotions. I pray that humanity never views the Confederation as a threat to what they love, because if they do, this galaxy will learn what the Drakmori learned. When humans decide something must end, it ends. When humans decide something must change, it changes. When humans decide to care about you, you become part of something larger than yourself. We invited them into our